I assume every man that I work with doesn't want his wife to hurt. I feel alone in our marriage.
Men, listen up. You think being a nice guy will save your marriage? It won't. It might be the very thing killing it.
When I'm on business trips, when I'm at the office, when I'm driving around, when I'm busy, I don't even remember you're a person. Doing nothing wrong and loving somebody can still yield trust erosion and negativity to our relationships.
Matthew Fray is here to destroy the biggest myth in modern relationships.
I cared nothing about doing or saying something. I can't hurt more than I already hurt, so I was worried about nothing. And I know that's not a universal experience.
And if you've ever felt confused, frustrated, or blindsided by a breakup, this episode will hit you like a gut punch. You need to hear this before it's too late.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Matthew Fray. He's the author of an incredible book called This Is How Your Marriage Ends. He's a relationship coach, and he's currently on Substack with his newsletter called On the Rocks. Matthew, welcome to the show.
How you doing, sir? Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we were chatting a little bit before. I recommended your books to a number of my clients. I think it is one of the best just primers around relationship dynamics and, people that are going through a divorce or on the edge of divorce. So I'm really honored to be able to talk to you and kind of pick your brain a little bit, and offer up to our guys like some real just like down to earth practical advice that I think a lot of us men can be really blind to until it's too late.
Thank you. I appreciate that from you, especially. Thanks.
Yeah, so I always like to start with the personal story. So what got you into this? What made you want to start becoming a relationship coach and writing about relationships and divorce?
The really speedy version is when I was 4, my parents divorced, and my mom moved back to where she was originally from. She'd met my father away at college. And so they got married, had me, got divorced really young, 23 and 21, got divorced, predictably, it turns out. And then, mom moved us away when I was 4, almost 5. And everything seems really normal, and she just checks every box, and she's fantastic, and she still is. And we've come a long way from 12 years ago when, sort of my book starts. But it's everything that you've heard before. I was listening to one of your shows with Philip, is it Botha? And he told a story that reminded me so much of my story, right? There's all these things you don't know when you're a young person. And I think if we're going to stereotype a little bit when you're a young man, that you don't understand about how your behavior impacts relationships and or a specific human that you want to be partnered with. And so anyway, when my son, who is now, 16, almost 17, was exactly the same age I was, we got divorced. I mean, in this case, I felt like I got left. And it was very victim-y about it at the time. I can't believe she's doing this to me. And my work since, so now it's just been a 12-year progression of seeking to understand why she left. And it has manifested into sort of accidental thought leadership on the subject. And I use the term thought leadership usually because I don't hold myself up to being some great wise person. What I do think my work can do is break through to somebody who's a lot like me. And it turns out there's a bunch of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell me more about that archetype of getting married early, because I see kind of 2 archetypes. I'm curious your thoughts on that too, I guess, of one is get married early and then it falls apart because people grow, I think, in different directions, or we're just not prepared for actual marriage or relationship. And then the other archetype that we'll loop around to is I think the empty nester archetype, the people that kind of kept it together for the kids, but then it falls apart, in their late 40s, maybe their 50s, something like that. But I want to start with the one that sounds like you personally experienced. So yeah, say more about that. How does that tend to play out for people?
And I think that's a really good question. And something I think you might understand better than I do is that I don't know that numerical age correlates quite as much as just fundamentally having blinders on as you enter relationships. My work is based on the premise that it's a bunch of good people, not necessarily, and then these are really broad generalizations. There are, air quotes, bad people who do very overtly horrible things to their relationship partner. But I'm trying to reach the guy who's like, I don't get it. I don't get why I go to work every day and I love her and I'm trying really hard and I don't do all these awful things that I understand to be bad for marriage. I don't do any of them. She could trust me not to do those. And yet it seems like I can never quite reach whatever good enough is for her. This like endless litany of complaints and criticisms about me in this relationship, and it's really frustrating. And I feel like her criticism and her unfair expectations are more the problem than anything I'm doing, because nobody else in my life is complaining about me in this way. She is a sample of one. I know 1,000 people, whatever, and she's the only one she's the statistical outlier of people who register or level these complaints against me. No one else in my work life, in my friendships, in my family ever said any of these things. So she's the one who's wrong. I think that is what happens. And I think it correlates with age, certainly. But I mean, I've heard plenty of 40 and 50-year-old men say that very thing.
Yeah, I love how you laid that out there, because that is the story of a lot of guys that come to therapy, right? And they're in that, balance that you're talking about, where they want to dismiss it because they're like, data point of one, maybe she's just crazy, or she's just nagging me, or she's miserable, right? But then they're also like, but it's my wife, it's the person that knows me the best, arguably, and spends the most amount of time with me. So it can be really confusing for guys. What are some examples of some of those criticisms that go towards men? I have a couple that I have, but I'm curious what you hear in your work.
It's funny. Wow. I want to answer this question really well, and I'm not sure they know how to articulate it. I'm not sure that the guy that I tend to run into, it's more like I say it and then he nods. And here's how I say it. So if you'll forgive me for not answering your question the way that you asked it, and maybe you can help me find a more precise answer if we get there. But the way that I coach about it is I'm like, I generally believe there to be two habits or behaviors that revolve around mindfulness that men tend to lack or fail to demonstrate in their marriages, that they may demonstrate in other parts of their life. And the order of events goes like this. I do something, let's call it leaving the toilet seat up. I do something and I don't think that shouldn't matter, right? Cancer matters, war matters, starvation matters. A toilet seat I left up doesn't matter. My wife is healthy and strong, and she can totally put that down. She does not need me to do that for her. Yet, I am constantly hearing from her when I leave the toilet seat up, and it's not something I even think about. I've just my entire life, been like easy in the bathroom that way. And then she's complaining to me about it. And we have a conversation after, so I do this thing that seems so benign to me, and then we have this conversation, and it leads into another fight over and over and over again. And that's the pattern. And when I try to break it down for the person in my life, because I really try to I'm trying to convince men that while what we're doing isn't necessarily wrong, it absolutely correlates with the slow erosion of trust in our relationships. And people are like, I don't lie, I don't cheat. What are you talking about? Trust. This is insane. And I'm like, well, here's how. She expresses a need or a want. And let's say it's, could you please put the toilet seat down for me? Fine, whatever. So every single time for the rest of your relationship that she goes into the bathroom and the toilet seat's left up, it can really only mean one of two things. You thought about it. You remembered all of the times she's asked you to do that for her, and you're like, meh, I'm going to do what I want. When push comes to shove, I choose me and what I want over my wife and what she wants. I don't really care. I'm going to do things my way. That's not almost never what it means, but it could mean that. She has to consider you thought about it and you did it on purpose. The other thing it could mean is you're just busy minding your own business, and she didn't even register. She isn't even on your radar as a person that will be impacted by the things that you do. And that is almost always, at least in the people that I meet, the condition in the relationship. And she's like, holy shit. She's like, after all of these years and all of these conversations and all of my attempts to communicate something that matters to me, that's so easy to do, by the way, she's like spinning it. She's like, this is the easiest thing in the world. I'm not asking them, right? I'm not asking him to build me a deck or put a new roof on or do something crazy. I'm asking him, please just put the toilet seat down for me. And he won't do it, either on purpose or by accident. But either way, there's this theme in our marriage where if he doesn't think something matters, I can't trust him to honor my diverse experiences from his. He chooses himself over me, either in a really selfish, me first jerky way, or in this oblivious, I don't matter enough to remember way. So that's, to me, step one of what happens in marriages. And I wrote about this story about leaving this glass by the sink. And I wrote this article that went viral once called She Divorced Me Because I Left Dishes by the Sink. But really, it was just this drinking glass I used to take like vitamins and medicine and things in the morning. It drove her crazy. And so I tell that same story. I'm like, when my wife came into the kitchen, it either meant I left it there as like an FU, I do what I want, I don't care how you think and feel about it, or I was so busy getting to work, which is almost always the case, I just sort of thoughtlessly like threw it there. You matter so little to me, I essentially forget you will be affected by the things that I do. The second thing that I think absolutely destroys, and thank you so much for mentioning the book and for checking it out, but the thing that I think is the most useful and actionable from my book is this concept I introduced called the Invalidation Triple Threat, the 3 ways I believe people, usually men, respond to their partners when they say, hey, you left the toilet seat up and it really hurt me or upset me or whatever, right? And your instinct is to roll your eyes like, you've got to be shitting me. Like, how are we making a thing out of this toilet seat? That's insane, which is exactly what I did about that glass by the sink. And the invalidation triple threat are the 3 ways we respond to people. And I just want to be so clear, because people listening to this do this in their marriage, 100%. There's going to be like a bunch of people that do this. I don't mean to imply that this is bad. I mean to imply that this correlates with trust erosion in your marriage. You're not wrong to do these things. It will destroy marriage very slowly over time. Please consider not doing it anymore. So I don't mean this as a judgment. I mean it as an observation. Please think about building new habits around communication. Version 1 of the invalidation triple threat. Wife comes to you and says, hey, you left the toilet seat up. It's really upsetting me. And I'm like, I don't think about it that way. I'm like, this is not a big deal. Cancer is important. You can put it down yourself. Because I don't think about this the way you think about it, you're wrong, and I'm going to keep doing things my way. The implication is you're wrong, you're stupid, or you're crazy. Version 2 is the emotional inverse of that. It's not so much what we think, but it's what we feel. My wife's like, that really upset me. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't imagine being so petty and fragile that I would have such a reaction to something that seems so benign to me. Because you feel wrong about this, and I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm going to keep doing things my way. It's up to you to grow some resilience and some anti-fragility and toughen up a little bit. Get your priorities straight. I used to think and feel things like that about my ex-wife, truly. And I think the implication is you're weak, you're hypersensitive, you're overreacting. There's something broken within you that you need to solve, because nothing bad's even happening. Version 3 is defensiveness. I think it's the worst one in terms of trust erosion. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, something you did adversely affected me. And we hijack it and say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. Let me explain why I do things the way that I do. None of these things have to even be jerky. They're just a fundamental adult disagreement about what's important, about what hurts, about what our priorities should be. And defensiveness implies you accusing me or suggesting that I did something wrong is way worse than whatever I did. And I'm going to prioritize feeling attacked right now instead of demonstrating any amount of care or respect around this thing that you're bringing to my attention. Anyway, I find those response patterns to destroy love and trust. Because if we're going to put a bow on that idea, what somebody learns after, say, 15, 20 years of marriage, the wife in this instance, it's not always, but often, she learned if something is upsetting or hurting me on some level, and the only way for my husband to know about it, I don't necessarily think he's doing it on purpose, the only way for him to know about it is for me to go tell him. But I've had this conversation with him thousands of times, it feels like, and it's always the same. If he doesn't think what I think, if he doesn't feel what I feel, then the response is some version of, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're crazy, or you're weak, you're hypersensitive, you're overreacting, or I didn't do anything wrong, stop blaming me. And so someone learns, if I'm having a problem, I can't go to my partner and ask for help. I can't. They have to rubber stamp approve my pain in order to show up in a way that feels like love and care. And when that happens to somebody enough times, when they realize I can't even ask him for help, because if he doesn't arrive at the same conclusion I arrive at, he essentially abandons me. He judges me as wrong and leaves me to feel bad alone. That's the recipe for really excellent, really smart people who care about each other to have a massive fallout. Jumping ahead to what you said about what might be like gray divorce, I don't know if it falls in that category, but definitely the category of like people or women, sometimes, I think of it as women more often than not, sort of sticking it out until the kids are old enough. I know that that's not universally true. I don't want to sound like I'm picking on men because I'm really not. I think men are great. I think we were a little bit shortchanged in the relational skill development department. I don't think our fathers and grandfathers and coaches and teachers spent very much time saying, hey, young man, this is how to navigate your relationships in an effective way. I don't think we got that.
Yeah, I don't think we got that. Yeah, I want to jump in on where you're talking about, because I think it's a fundamental difference between male and female psychology, right? And I like the way you're highlighting it, whereas I think men, we're very literal, right? Like you said, we're like, toilet seat up, who cares? If there's food on the table, I'm not hitting you, I'm not an alcoholic, our kids are, have a college fund, like those are the important things. But women are very emotional. And I like the way that you're highlighting that, because I think as men, we're not educated on that. We don't really get that they're having an emotional conversation. It's not about the thing, and like you hear that a lot, but I think your example really proved that it's about trust. It's about feeling validated. It's about feeling like a priority. So when the woman is asking you to put the seat down, it's more about like, do you care about me? Do you prioritize me? Am I important? But as guys, we're just so quick to either dismiss or to solve the problem. Be like, fine, I'll put it down. Or like, I'll buy some device. I'll buy like an automatic toilet seat closer or something, right? And we'll never have to fucking talk about this again. But it ends up just dismissing women over and over again, And, I want to throw this past you kind of like to that first question of what women say. When I talk to my guys, what we get is kind of vague feedback that I think it's hard for us to understand. So I'm curious if they can translate to man talk, right? But I think like, wives say things like, yeah, you don't care enough, right? Or you're not present, or I don't feel like I'm important. And as guys, we're doing that kind of triple threat, right? You said we're dismissing it all these X, Y, and Z different ways. But it's very rarely actionable feedback, I think, that men struggle to really do anything about. And we get really confused in those conversations.
Yes, sir. The big one for me, and I use it a lot now, as like a coach guy, is, and my wife said this to me all the time, at the end, I feel alone in my marriage. I feel alone in our marriage is a big one. And taking it back to that little like pontification speech I just gave about mindful consideration of someone else via the toilet seat, and then learning how to validate the experiences of someone else conversationally, I just think is so critical. I want people to just see, I assume every man that I work with doesn't want his wife to hurt. I do. I don't think he wants her to hurt. I think there's a disconnect between the amount of pain she feels, and I hate talking to women about this because I don't really know what to say. She's like, I'm telling him, and I'm like, he still doesn't see it. He doesn't get it. And she's like, how can that be? And I'm like, that's a great question, because I want him to so bad, and I wish I had so bad. I would never do something knowingly where like it hurt my wife in a way that I could sort of tangibly like measure or feel or think about or whatever. And I just don't think most of these guys get it. I don't think the words I use is like see the pain. I think it's invisible, and I think she says it, and I think he clocks it as some sort of like hyperbole or overreaction or something, like on average. How is it conceivable that a toilet seat being left up could result in some measure of pain for you? But you said it. Like you said it, after 20 years, it means the toilet seat is like, I do this to you on purpose because I don't care. Or you don't even register. You're not present with me in my daily consciousness. You're not a person I think about. Yeah, when I'm on business trips, when I'm at the office, when I'm driving around, when I'm busy, I don't even remember you're a person, like in my life. That's how these people, but often women, are experiencing the toilet seat being left up as another piece of evidence, because, right, it's not just the toilet seat. It's like 17,000 other little, tiny, seemingly benign scenarios. And they all, like, tell the story to the person that feels hurt by them. Here's another piece of evidence, right, that he's either doing this on purpose, like eyes wide open, or he's not thinking about me at all. And then the icing on the cake is I can't go talk to him about it, because then that whole invalidation thing is going to happen, because that's what always happens. He has to agree it's a problem to take any action to address it. And when he doesn't agree, I'm left alone to feel bad all by myself. equals I feel alone in my marriage. Where I used to think, I'm coming home every night. What are you talking about? How could you feel alone? And as you know, you understand full well, physical presence and whatever level of security and intimate connection is required for people to feel safe and secure in their lives together does not, it's not met by simply being in the same room.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just build on that, right? It's like, how do you learn to speak the feminine language? Because again, you talk to like an average dude and I'll be like, I care about her more than anything. I work my ass off for my family. I'm always there to fix every problem that she has. I'm, buying her dinner and I'm like taking her on dates and like, I'm learning her sexual language, right? I mean, I think the guy who gets exasperated and that, is probably heading towards divorce, it feels like the scales are really unbalanced for that dude. Because I think in our male world, it's like we show care by investment, financial maybe first and foremost, right? But also commitment and like you said, not cheating and not becoming an alcoholic and all of these things. But when it comes to those seemingly minor things or, minor in the male world, we fall short. So how do you recommend a guy learns how to validate his wife without compromising his self-respect? If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show.
Sure. Yeah, well, right. And I talk about that. And I'm like, first of all, I understand that on a case-by-case basis, you're having a conversation with your wife and you think she's, and then if you'll please forgive the language, but forgive, she's like, batshit, like, what is she even talking about right now? Like, that's, what lunacy to arrive at that conclusion, based on all of my data points. That's truly how it feels. And so I want to defend him. Validation does not equal. I agree with your conclusion, and I feel the same way about it. And as you may or may not remember from the book, I go through the spiel about, and this is what I talk to my clients about when they're really working on this. The framing for this is, can you develop a couple of habits that will change your life? And habit number one that I prioritize is the conversational one, the validating one. What does it look like to validate? And I tell this story about a kid being afraid of a monster hiding under the bed and how one, as a father, how one might navigate that. And on autopilot, without doing any relational work. If my son, who again is now 16, but he used to be 4, if he woke up in the middle of the night crying and afraid of a monster hiding under his bed, and I ran up to his room because I heard him crying and yelling and, he needed help. And I'd open the door and he'd be like, Dad, I'm afraid there's a monster under the bed. In a half second, my brain's like, there isn't a monster under the bed. What are we even talking about? There's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to be crying right now. And I would say that. I'd say, dude, there isn't a monster under the bed. There's nothing to be afraid of. You're fine. Go back to sleep. You're okay. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. I don't have time for invisible monsters right now. And they leave. And I don't know that I would have done that. But this is a thought exercise. And to me, the important conclusion of the thought exercise is that I didn't do anything wrong. I was absolutely scientifically, factually correct that there was no monster under the bed. 2, I love my son more than I've ever loved anything. Ever. 3, I have never and will never do something designed to inflict some sort of pain or suffering on him. I don't do that. And it's one big corollary to our marriages, our adult relationships. I'm right. I love them. I've never tried and never will try to hurt them. What are we talking about here? How am I not safe? How am I not trustworthy? But what's left over? What's on the other side of the equal sign when I leave that bedroom? There's a kid. He's crying. He's afraid. Regardless of whether there's a monster there or not, he's crying and afraid. And he just learned if Dad doesn't agree that the scary thing is scary, that the problem's the problem, he implies that I'm weak, that I'm hypersensitive, that I'm overreacting, that I'm wrong, stupid, crazy. Then he abandons me to be scared and cry alone in the dark. Someday I'm going to leave Dad out of the inner circle. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me. Doesn't mean I don't love him. I just don't trust him very much. And when something hard is happening in my life, something big and important and meaningful to me, and I calculate that Dad might not agree that it's as big and important, I'm just going to go ahead and leave Dad on outside the fence of, and if you remember from Meet the Parents, the circle of trust, he's going to be on the outside looking in. And I think that's an important idea, and everybody gets to decide for themselves how much they care about that. There's nothing universally right or wrong about any of this. I just think it illustrates how doing nothing wrong and loving somebody can still yield trust erosion and negativity to our relationship. And so what does validating look like? And this is what I talk to all the guys about. It's my favorite part of the conversation because they're like, Matt, what are you saying? I just got to agree with everything my wife says all the time. I've got to agree with her in order to be a good husband. That's bullshit. I'm like, of course not. You don't have to agree there's a monster under the bed and feel afraid of it to validate the fears of someone else, because that would be insane. But what I would do today in that scenario is I'd sit on the bed and I'd hug my kid. And I'd say, "Bud, I don't think there's a monster under the bed, but you know what? I've been afraid before. And being afraid is hard. I'm really sorry that's what's going on with you. Let's turn the light on. Let's make sure there's nothing scary under the bed." And then the big thing, and the work for men, the work is sitting in the discomfort. And because it's a lot harder with an angry or sad wife than it is with a cute little kid who's crying in bed. It's admittedly so much harder. I just want somebody to have an idea anchor to draw back on when they're thinking about these things. That it's not about who's right and whether the scary thing is scary or not. It's just, what do you choose to do next? And I'm about achieving security, safety, and trust. I'm going to say, hey, I'm not going anywhere to tell me it's okay. And what I would tell my son, and what I want men everywhere to tell their relationship partners is, this is what I'd say to the kid. I'd be like, I always want you to come to me when something's wrong. And even if I can't fix what's wrong, and even if I can't fight your battle for you, the thing I can always give you, you'll never be alone to face or fight the scary thing that you're dealing with. I can always be in the foxhole with you. Even if I don't perceive the threat the same, even if I'm not particularly affected by it, I can make sure you're not alone in your battles with hard things. And that is, to me, the primary failure of men in relationships. But I want to be careful. It's not this conscious decision, right? Men aren't saying, I want to abandon my wife while she's facing something difficult. They're still trying to figure out how it's difficult.
Yeah.
So anyway, you get it.
It's another male female psychology difference, right? Like, I think men, we just like the good emotions, right? We want to feel happy. We want to feel powerful. We want to feel confident. So when there's a bad emotion, we're like, okay, kill that emotion, do what we need to do, destroy it, cope with it, and then go back to being happy. Whereas I find with women and feminine individuals, they love all the emotions. I mean, just look at the TV they watch, right? They'll watch the saddest, most horrible shit. And if they're crying together with their friends, they're bonding, right? They're bonding through the full spectrum of emotions. And I think as guys, we don't get that and we don't like it. So it's it goes back to the idea of feeling like we care. When our wives are upset about something, they want us to be there in the upset, and bond through the upset, not try to kill it and bring it back to happiness. But I think that is really not natural for certainly more masculine dudes, right? Our whole job is to keep the boat steady, and keep the good vibes flowing. So the idea that she might want us to be sad together and that's okay is very scary for dudes.
Something my work, so this is where I'd love to get your insight. Mm-hmm. Something my work rarely addresses, but I want it to. If there's a second book or a second phase of all of this, I want to deep dive on some other areas. I just hyper focus on this. Am I considerate of my partner, the dish by the sink or the toilet seat up? A, can I develop a mindfulness habit around those ideas? And B, can I achieve validating someone conversationally, even when my brain is there's no monster in the bed, what are you even talking about? Can I still rise up and do that? And I just think that will have a net positive effect on relationships, hugely. But one of the ideas that I've not explored a lot, and you probably understand it on a really high level, is this notion of a spouse being all things to their partner. Meaning, if my wife has a good relationship with her mom and her sisters and her best friends, is it reasonable that the majority of that sitting in the sad can be achieved through them? And I would never advise the guy to be blow it off and be go talk to your sisters. That obviously isn't going to be healthy for marriage. But in a healthy relationship, to me, the wife is saying, hey, I know this isn't your area of expertise. I know you love me. I'm going to retreat a little bit and, be with my sisters or my friends or whatever right now so we can be sad about this thing. I'm just interested in your take on the it takes a village mindset, where sometimes 100% of our needs can't be met by a partner. Maybe all the time 100% of our needs can't be met. So can we have relationships or other with other people or things that can help us achieve whatever balance looks like, whatever safety and security looks like?
Totally. Right. I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Right. That is the healthier model. But I do think it takes a level of communication that, men and women, that EQ is low in this country. It takes a man being vulnerable and saying something like, hey, You know, when you watch those movies about child abuse, it really upsets me and it kind of ruins my day. You know, and no judgment to you, but I don't like that activity. You know, I would really prefer if you do that with your friends, and I'm going to be full support of that. But like that actually is detrimental to me because I think a lot of men think that women think like them, and a lot of women think that men think like them, right? So like she doesn't know the impact those things have on us, you know? And I think it's another kind of common example is, you know, a lot of women want to come home and they want to debrief their day, you know, and they want to say everything that they did that day. And they want to say like who they saw, who they talked to, and what, you know, what music they listened to. And they go through like really for men, like kind of excruciating detail of what's going on, right? Because that's how they connect. That's how women connect with each other, is in that really play-by-play, super detailed way of communicating. But most masculine dudes I talk to, we all do that, but it is draining for us, right? It is like extra effort. It's kind of a little boring. It's a little frustrating. We don't see the world that way. We're very action oriented. Like when we talk about our days, we're like, I did this and I got that, and this is where I am now. It's like boom, 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 you know, very linear. But we need to be vulnerable and tell the women in our life that like, yeah, I don't talk that way. And I will, you know, I'll do that for you and I want to, but it is draining. Because I think it takes that level of honesty for women to really understand male psychology too, right? Because I think you can get to that kind of imbalanced way where the guy feels like he's bending over backwards trying to impress his wife, like you said, or be there for her. But doesn't feel like it's reciprocated.
No,
it doesn't feel like she understands how he sees the world.
Yeah, you know, I almost think about like Chapman's 5 love languages when you say that, this like missing each other, because it's like we're intending the thing and you're not receiving it because like our languages are different. But yeah, it's something, and I'd love for you, please, I don't know you well enough to know if you be like push back on like somebody you don't know like super well. Push back if you think this is like bullshit. One of the things that I talk to men about is I'm like, cause that exactly we describe it. I want you to know I have that experience. Like listening to the play-by-play of the day, it's like, did I really like there was like 47% of that I didn't need, and it felt hard to like listen to that when you said it. And I don't know that I articulate that very well, like in my personal life. But I know the feeling, and I certainly failed to show up effectively at the dinner table or riding in the car with my ex-wife in this way. This is a huge thing that you're talking about that's very common.
A lot of guys feel this. A lot of guys feel like have the energetic drain of interacting with like feminine communication styles.
Yeah. And so what I've tried to encourage men to consider doing is they're like, so your wife's asking you about your day, right? She wants to know. And I think about it a little bit different than like, I don't necessarily, it's not about the play-by-play so much as, to me, the language of, I want to know who you are so I can love and respect you the best way I can, is for me to understand how things that happen to you affect you. And so I'm less interested in like the journalism details of what occurred, and I'm more interested in your assessment of how you were affected by it. So I had this couple I was working with in Florida. I'm not a couples counselor per se, but I talked to them for, like a year, and she was like, man, he doesn't open up to me at all. And it's what most women say about their male partners, is like, he withholds truth. It's not that he's a liar. It's that I know there are true things he thinks and feels, and I don't have access to those. And that can affect trust and security in relationships. And I'm like, something I would encourage you to try practicing is when you're talking about the things that happen to you, worry less about this happened at this time and at this place. And add the color of, this is how I was angry because of it, or I was sad because of it, or I was happy because of it. And can you offer that insight, those data points, for your relationship partner to like know you better, more effectively? Now, listen, I'm not a clinician. For anybody listening is like, is this guy like a doctor? I'm not even kind of one. I'm really interested in your take on how viable that is, and whether you believe like that's a thing that could be useful in relationship.
Yes, I think it's a thing. It opens up kind of like another kind of taboo topic that I want to bounce back to you. But to reiterate, like, I find that women, okay, let me back it up. Women often ask just what you're saying. They say like, I want to know my man and I want his emotions. I want to know his emotions, right? But however, and this is the taboo piece, is like, I found that when a guy is truly emotional, right? Like either really angry or really sad or really ashamed or kind of that like puddle, it kind of disgusts women. It kind of turns them away because like, whoa, I didn't want this raw emotion. I don't want to like be his mom right now, right? Because it moves from that like partner lover to mother. And, incest sucks, right? So like the attraction fades really fast right? Because it's like, oh, they're in a caretaking mode. They're not in like an attractive partner mode. But what they do want is exactly what you're saying. And I coach my guys do the same thing of like, they want like the hero's journey. You know, they want like, hey, here was the problem. Here's how I felt about the problem. Here's how that feeling reminded me of my childhood or reminded me of, you know, something in the past. Here's how I dealt with it. And here's what I'm going to do in the future. They kind of want that like emotional story. Again, almost like they're watching a TV show. I mean, I use a lot of those metaphors. They're watching like reality TV or watching a, you know, soap opera or something, right? They want the emotional journey, but I have found that they really struggle with the raw, unprocessed, kind of messy emotions. I'm curious what you think about that point, because I think it's a little more taboo, you know?
No, it's really good. Yeah. I mean, I want to push back on this, please. If you're like, hey, Matt, no, I want to believe that some more early relationship dating than it would be in, say, like year 10 with somebody. But I don't know. And I tend to focus on like year 10, right? I want people to like not inadvertently like watch their relationship wither from the inside, more so than I think about like attraction, dating, and things like that. But everything you said is super legit to me. I do think most men want to be attractive and desirable to their relationship partner and perhaps to others. And I think that matters. I mean, that's a really good question. I guess I think about it in like a meta way. If I'm aware that me being emotionally vulnerable might show up as unattractive, might show up, that's me practicing mindful consideration of how what I do or what I'm being is impacting someone else. If I can own it, if I can acknowledge it, if I can account for it, if I can talk about it, be like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, you know what I mean? It's not your fucking job to like mother me or like, you know, rock me to sleep right now. I'm not trying to be, you know, whatever. I don't know. I'm interested. I've never seen that before. So, but I want to believe, based on my personal experiences, which is a data sample of 1, which is not a good statistical model, that you can be emotionally vulnerable and super honest. And as long as you like own it and I am aware that, you know, this isn't like a universally attractive thing. So like Mark, when I first got divorced, one of the things I loved about being like newly-ish divorced, I think I waited like a year, but it felt really new at the time. Still felt fresh and raw, was I was just like, I'd sit on the other side of the dinner table on dates and didn't give a shit. I cared nothing about doing or saying something that might result in the other person. I was very strong of the mindset that if this doesn't work out and it fails fast, great. I don't want to fail in year 10. I don't give a shit about now. Like, I can't hurt more than I already hurt. So I was worried about nothing. And I know that's not a universal experience, but I got an enormous, and let's keep in mind also, I was predominantly dating women who were on the other side of divorce. So, right, they're coming off probably emotionally closed off men, and I demonstrated something different. And I think they liked it, was my experience, but that's definitely not still like the badass that's like 6'4", you know, with like rock hard abs that like rides the motorcycle is definitely cooler, more attractive than I'll ever be. Like, I understand this.
Well, but what you're demonstrating is like consistency. You know, like I think there is something very attractive in men to women about being consistent. You know, if you go back to kind of the high school thing, it's why they like the asshole, right? Because the asshole's always the asshole. He's not like a wiggly guy. You know, he's not, you know, a nice guy, right? He's not a chameleon, which a lot of us, you know, learned how to be. Right. But I think the fact that you're like open, honest, confident, it gives them something to like push up against. Right. I mean, like women want that like strong pillar that they can push up against. And again, if you're vulnerable and open, as long as you're consistently vulnerable and open, that's great. Right. Because I think that builds trust. Your woman wants to know who you are and they want to know how you're going to act in a situation, good, bad, and ugly. They just want to know you. It's not about being an archetype. And it's certainly not about being like, you know, a wet noodle. You know, and that was the question I was going to ask you is we talk a lot on this show and a lot of my caseload is like the nice guys, right? The guy that maybe was a child of divorce, right? And was told, hey, don't be like your father. Don't be an asshole, right? Or didn't have a present father or maybe lost their dad for whatever reason, raised by a lot of women. And they're being fed these messages about like, don't be X, Y, and Z. So they get into a marriage and they're just like doing all the stuff. They're doing all these skills. They're doing it all, but they don't have that backbone. They don't have their own identity often. And underneath that, you know, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of these dudes. It's like there's often deep resentment. sometimes there's, bad behavior like a porn addiction, right? Or a drug addiction or drinking. There's like often this like double life thing that happens with nice guys because there has to be an outlet somewhere. But yeah, I'm very curious about your take on that archetype, right? The guy who is doing it all, but it's not authentic,
Yeah, copious amounts of insecurity and jealousy too, usually. That's the guy that's like afraid of being left. And I think I demonstrated some, not all of that, certainly. And yeah, no, and so like, Dr. Robert Glover wrote, like the manual, so to speak, on like that idea. And I don't know his work inside and out, but I know his name and I know like the celebrity of that book, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, great book. And listeners, we actually interviewed him on the podcast a while back, so you can go and check that out.
Oh, nice. I would love to hear. Yeah, I will. I'll do that.
If you're listening and you want to listen to Dr. Robert Glover, he's on the show. But yeah,
I'm going to go do that. I've never heard an interview with him. I'd love to. It's funny. I think, I just got done saying, I'm going to talk about it both sides of my mouth a little bit. I was just saying, I'm focusing on like the 10 years and I was worried about this like attraction thing that I associate more with like the early part of a relationship. But the truth is attraction matters in year 10. And I do think this nice guy syndrome shows up as emotionally exhausting. And I love that word consistency from you because yeah, there's like sort of this emotional like absence of reliability. I mean, one of the things, if we're going to like take it back to like kind of what I'm usually talking about in my work and how it often shows up, there's this uncertainty that a lot of men experience at home around, what the feminist community calls like emotional labor, or the mental load. And I think it has a ton of merit, that it's like, so many times women, mothers feel like they are the CEOs of the household and that they may or may not have like a professional life too. But they're like, it's so exhausting for me to think about everything that has to happen for our house to work. And that I have to think about everything that has to happen for our kids to be properly cared for with like doctor's forms and school clothes and supplies and schedules. And it's like, so often it's like this guy may make $1 gazillion a year and be just a fabulous provider and a really good person. But like, to me, I find those two ideas correlate. I don't know if you agree with that or not, that the nice guy can often be this sort of like absentee in the minds and hearts of his partner, husband and father. And she feels this unfair burden of responsibility. And the guy's like, Jesus, I'd love if I could just hang out every day. Like if I could just like be home and kind of do what I want, like that would be amazing. And that becomes like this really common fight that people have. And I link it a little bit to the nice guy thing, but it's obviously not universally true because there's plenty of like alpha badass CEO types out there where they're also absent as parents and or husbands, and they are not exhibiting those classic nice guy syndrome.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Well, but I think it dovetails to what you were talking about earlier and what's in your book, right? Of like women wanting to know you, right? And women want to be validated, because I think the nice guy, the whole thing, and it could be, you can be a badass CEO outsider, you can be a total, doormat. But the thing is like being like, I'm going to be easy. I'm going to be easy. I'm not going to have an opinion. I'm going to do whatever she wants to do. I'm going, whatever restaurant she wants to go to, I'm going to go to. Whatever she wants to do, we're going to make it happen. I'm just going to be like as easy as possible and not cause any problems. But yeah, then they end up feeling, just like you said earlier, they end up feeling really alone because they want a co-CEO, right? They want a co-partner. They don't want like another child that they have to manage, right? And even though we're saying, oh, we're easy, nobody is like that. Everybody has preferences. So we might be saying that, but then we go to the restaurant that we don't want to go to, and we're just like kind of shitty. We're kind of pouting. We're like, oh, I don't want anything. I'm not that hungry, right? Like we just like make it a shitty experience because we didn't, express our preference on the front end. because again, we're afraid of the woman, right? We're afraid of upsetting her or afraid of getting yelled at or whatever. It's usually like a trauma root, right? But like, it's the idea of being easy, which again, I think women teach that to men because they say like, the powerful, commanding, domineering dude, like you don't want to be that. So we do 180, but that sucks too,
Yeah. No, that was really well said. No, it was so well articulated. And right, I remember that from my marriage too. There was definitely elements of that where it's like, I'd go along to get along. Like, it's fine, whatever. I don't have super strong feelings. But then like, there's this like subtle resentment that builds. And then when she like picks on me because of the dish by the sink, I'm like, all of these like little things on the ledger where I'm like, I did this and this and this and this and this because I thought it's what you wanted. And then you're going to make a big deal out of this small shit thing on the side? Are you out of your mind? Like, who are you? I remember that. And and again, in an unhealthy relationship, we withhold truth. In a healthy relationship, I would say, I don't really want to go, but I also believe in negotiation and compromise. So if this really matters to you, if this is like a 9 out of 10 thing you want to do, and it's like a 4 out of 10 thing I don't want to do, why don't we like go? So, you know what I mean? And like when it really, really matters to me, I'll make sure I articulate that. Because I don't want you to secretly think I'm like begrudgingly doing this. And, again, it's all about like self-awareness and really like owning how what we do and say and how we're being is impacting the other person. To me, that's the absolute crux of my work is, can I demonstrate consistent, almost ever present, mindful consideration? It's really hard. We don't do it. It's really hard to bat 1,000 doing this. But can I more often than not demonstrate awareness of how what I do and don't do rolls downhill and affects my relationship partner or honestly any human on earth? And to me, the degree to which I can be trusted to do that correlates most closely with the quality of like trust in our relationship. And I hold trust, the concept of the value of trust, as like the number one concept. A lot of people are like, I love her so much. You have so much love. And I'm like, it won't matter as much as how much you trust each other in terms of longevity, in my estimation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, right? I think it's like the dating variable is very different from the marriage variables. The dating, it is love, it's passion, it's sexual connection, it's fun. But yeah, the longer you go, it's like, it's trust, it's security, it's stability, it's consistency. It's like, who do you want to actually do life with and build a family with? It's a totally different thing. Yeah, guys, let's keep about that, like that transition. Because when I work with young men, I find that to be very difficult for them. Because I think as young dudes, we pick the fun, right? We optimize for the funnest, most dangerous, most emotional, chaotic, wild woman we can bat for, But I think those qualities are not great in a mother. You don't want a mother to be chaotic and wild and all that kind of stuff. You want someone that is consistent and loving and nurturing. So yeah, any thoughts on that of kind of moving and attracting and being attracted to different types of women? Because I see a lot of young men struggle with that,
Well, I think it's funny that you thought about that as partner selection, where like I think about it as how difficult I had of transitioning from the, keg party going college student to the like responsible adult with a young son. So, we got married when we were 25, then we had the kid when we were 29, and I didn't feel ready for that like grown up phase. I wasn't ready, and I think that scared the shit out of her. But on the attraction side, again, I don't spend a lot of time having conversations around. I do post-marriage. I do for like 35 to 45-year-olds who are like thinking about, and then to me, there's really, really important conversations to have around partner selection. But, I think it's really interesting, and I see myself in what you said, how there's like this like organic attraction to, like, I don't like stereotype, but like the pierced and tatted chick on the bike, like,
yeah, totally.
That's super hot.
Rock and roll chicken,
super
right?
hot, but I don't want her to like, I don't necessarily like imagine like going to the annual Thanksgiving family dinner, like that's, it's really funny. And then there's this conversation. What's really interesting to me is I do think that's negotiated depending on your family of origin, and your traditions and your values and your expectations. I shied away. I secretly like wanted to date like that girl like in college, but like the girl that I would take home to like meet mom and dad or whatever, like checked more like safe boxes, so to speak. And to be fair, my ex-wife is absolutely stunning, and she, she did check all the boxes. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing like anybody was gonna like be like learn and say, oh, like she checked all the like. When I said my parents got divorced and I wanted to be so careful not to, like that's the shit I was thinking about. I was never thinking about how I contribute. I was never thinking about how what I might do might factor into the math of all of this. I really boiled it down to partner selection, and I frankly have come to believe partner selection is like, you know, it's going to be sort of critical on certain levels, but I think it's going to have very little to do with like 10 to 15 years later. So long, it's right. It's like a pass or fail thing. Like they either like check enough boxes where you absolutely can have a healthy long-term relationship, or they don't. And it's up to you to suss that out, you know, within like 18 months. And how hard is that for a 25-year-old to do, where you don't even know what's going to matter when you're 37?
You don't even know what the boxes are. Yeah. Or your boxes.
It's so impossible. So right. I hate that for everyone. I don't think most young people, regardless of sex, like gender, like regardless of being male or female, understand what their 15 years later selves are going to need from the other. I think it's very unlikely. I do, on the other side of marriage, though, when I'm talking to the 35 to 45-year-old, I do think those people absolutely can like ascertain what would be most useful. So I take that part really seriously. One of the shocking pieces of research, it was like one friggin' sentence in the book, was learning that second marriages fail at a much higher clip statistically than first marriages. That blew my mind. That as awful as marriage can be, as awful as divorce can be, and how like disruptive and painful it can be for the participants, that we don't get it right more often the second time, to me really speaks to the difficulty of identifying our unhealthy relationship patterns.
Yeah. Well, yeah, working with someone like you, right, that you can actually hold that mirror up to them. Because, yeah, I mean, it's that, and, you know, that study goes on to say that, like, if you get number 3, it's unlikely that you will ever be successfully married again. If you go to divorce number 3, like, it's just like the stats just keep going up with repeat divorces over and over and over again, which is like pretty wild to think about, you know, because, yeah, the patterns don't change. People are just stuck in the same shit. And if you're stuck, you're stuck.
And so, Mark, I'm a huge, like, raise your hand and assume after 3 divorces that you're the common denominator. Like, that's my bias. That's my default. And I'm interested in if you think equally likely is there's something in my attractive partner selection process that is not conducive to like 10 years later.
Yeah. I think it's 2 things, right? I think one, it's like the unresolved childhood trauma, which is a big part of partner selection, right? You're like dating your mom, right? And if you didn't have a great mom, or there was some complicated things, you're just going to pick the same person over and over again. So even though you're in multiple relationships, it's all the same person, you know, and there's that, it's called in psychoanalysis, the passionate bad fit, right? It feels really passionate. It feels really awesome, but it's because it's trauma bonding. It's not actual love, you know? And then the other one, which I think we've been talking about without saying the word, is misogyny. You know, I think you have guys that go through this thing and they do that trifecta, and they dismiss women over and over and over again, and they just kind of double down on that. So I think there's a probably majority of guys, which I think is sad, but I think a majority of guys don't look at themselves, but they come to like, you know, bitches be crazy, right? Or all women suck, or everyone's going to nag me, right? They kind of buy into these misogynistic beliefs, and now they're painting this with this big brush over all the women in their lives. And if you're coming from that perspective, like, you're not going to get a successful marriage, right? You fundamentally hate the person that you're married to, it's never going to work.
My biggest detractors over the years, and there hasn't been a ton because I'm not well known enough to have like a bunch of detractors, very few. However, numerically speaking, but it's almost always like emanates from like the red pill community, like the manosphere, so to speak. They take a lot of issue. Like they interpret my work as like sort of anti-man, pro-woman, like I've heard it referred to as paternalism, all of this stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm really at the end of the day, while I am advocating for women here, it's in service of men having successful relationships. And it's my really strong belief. And I don't know that I'm getting everything right. It's just the best way I know how to think about it and say it. And so I don't know. I don't know what your take is on those groups. I'm not here to like demonize or judge anybody, but there are, to me, I don't know if it's just the power of the internet and social media, but it seems to be an increasing number of men gravitating toward that like Andrew Tate-ish position of, I'm going to abandon women outside of superficial having, physical desires met, perhaps transactionally, God, I don't even want to think about the other ways. But there's just this fundamental like distaste and dislike of women that I don't know how to some of those men claim to know how to have like healthy relationships, in this place of like dominance. And I have a really hard time believing maybe once in a great while you find somebody, some young woman who probably had to be treated a certain way by her father in order to willingly subject herself to that and claim to feel some measure of safety, trust, satisfaction. Anyway, I'm really curious because it's been such a powerful, I can't argue, they've been more successful than I have at reaching men.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Those are my main detractors too, and
Okay.
a lot of our stuff is very anti-manosphere. We're trying to present another road, which is the same what you're talking about, like emotional maturity, mindfulness, some level of equality. Like, I believe that in relationship roles, they have to be tied to gender, but I do think there are roles that men and women can play, But yeah, I mean, in February, we wrote a blog as for listeners too, the Incel's Guide to Love, which is directly talking about these guys, right? And talking about the amount of pain that's out there. And I think there's a lot of guys that have a lot of pain around women. And when they go to these red pill or incel communities, it just becomes misogyny and hatred, And like, it was the guy that was bullied or the guy that got dumped or got cheated on. He was 16 years old, right? Or the guy with the abusive mother, or a lot of my generation, millennials that were children of divorce, more of us grew up in divorced homes than not. So, we can have these negative opinions about women and because we didn't see a functioning family. So it's like without that intersection, right? And then holding the mirror, it just becomes an external hatred thing. And of course, right? I mean, like for men, I think for anybody, but I'll say for men, like pointing the finger outward is a lot easier than turning the gaze inward, and like, it's easy to be mad and just like be hateful. I think it's hard to do what you and I are suggesting, which is like actually take accountability for your shit and try to change it. So I think it pulls in a certain type of demographic of guy that's really hurt, really alone, and wants masculine connection. They want that brotherhood, that fraternal thing, and they're getting it. I think there's value in that, but they have to swallow quite a bit of a poison pill in order to feel like they belong to a community.
So yeah, no, it's ugly out there. I do feel sorry for people who are in secure relationships and ultimately want it. And right, they're trying to like find the path, and I think it's more difficult in 2025 than it's ever been. Yeah, and I wish, I don't know, I just keep talking about the same thing I always talk about because I think it's the way forward. And you may have a lot of people or reject you along the way, or you may have to reject a lot of people along the way. But when you exercise really good relational skill and you put a premium on healthy boundaries about like what you're going to tolerate, from a potentially unhealthy partner. Again, you may have a low, like sort of success rate, hit rate, so to speak, if we're thinking about batting average. But like once you find that, then it'll be just this like rock solid, trustworthy thing. Is the message. But again, I stay out of dating. But the truth is it matters. I want these people that are getting divorced to have healthy relationships. The only way is to date afterward. I don't know what to say because I do feel a little cynical about the prospects for everybody, both men and women.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. I agree. I mean, I think like there's a lot of guys that are railing against, all the feminist stuff and the woke stuff, the DEI stuff without really understanding it. And they feel attacked. They're like people that are attacking men. Like, I think that's real. I think that's happening, and then it's radicalizing them into these, way more extreme cases. And there's so much division and all that out there. But yeah, again, we're hoping to put out a message of introspection of kind of the long and the hard road, but the road that actually works, and the road that will help you find love and heal your trauma and become the man that you want to be and not just be like a bitter hater online. Because I don't think guys are having that much fun, Like, I don't think they're really happy. They're just angry all the time. And they're living in that outrage social media culture. So I do hope that they reach out to you and reach out to us and, get mentors in their life. Because, yeah, you said in the beginning of the show, right? It's like, I do think there's been a failure of our culture as older generations. There's like a lack of mentorship and a lack of male mentorship specifically, like being like, hey son, here's how you do marriage, or hey son, here's how you talk to a woman, or here's what you need to worry about. Like we don't have access to that. So it's a lot of guys like raising themselves online, and we're not coming up with the best ideas out there,
Okay.
So as we're wrapping up here, any final words for our listeners, and where can people find you online?
My final bit, if we're really talking about my work, I really want to encourage people to try to identify those little things in their shared lives with a relationship partner that might inadvertently communicate, hey, I'm aware this sucks for you and I do it anyway because I choose me over you. You're not trying to say it, but you're accidentally saying it when you leave the toilet seat up or the dish by the sink potentially. Those are all important conversations that we don't know until we know. But then, like, to me, the really low-hanging fruit opportunity is to think about that. There doesn't have to be a monster under the bed for someone to be afraid of it. And you don't have to agree there's one there and feel afraid of it in order to validate and speak and act in a manner that builds trust and security in a relationship. So your ultimate aim is don't speak and act in a manner that results in your partner feeling abandoned to feel bad alone while you're busy, I don't know, maybe choosing yourself over them. Even though in the moment you're in, it really feels like you're the victim of circumstances and you're having more pain than they are. It's really, really hard. But like consideration, validation. Pair those two habits together over and over again, you can have an enormous amount of trust and security in your relationships. And in terms of my work, I do think the book is useful for if you forgive the air quotes, like guys like me, just guys that like mean well. And then they have a marriage of, 5 to 15, 20 years that just like falls apart and they sort of can't articulate why. They're like, I can't even tell you what went wrong. Nobody cheated. Nobody committed any crimes. Nothing like super bad happened. We just kind of like fell apart. I really do think my book can fill in a lot of those blanks for people. And it's called This Is How Your Marriage Ends, A Hopeful Approach to Saving Relationships. And so consider seeking that out if you're a reader or somebody who likes to listen to books on audio. And then if you want to pay attention to like new writing that I'm doing, I have a newsletter that comes out 2 or 3 times a week on a platform called Substack. It's just an email newsletter called On the Rocks. If you were to go to MatthewFray.com, you'd find that easily enough. Then Marc, thank you for asking.
Yeah. And listeners, all that stuff will be in the show notes. So we'll have an Amazon link to the book as well as a link to the Substack and its website. So check them out. If you're feeling really inspired by this conversation, if you are that guy, right, that you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on, but it's falling apart. We're not talking anymore. We're not having sex. Maybe we're sleeping in separate bedrooms, right? Like read this book before it falls apart completely, because I do think it is recoverable. Work with Matthew, check out his stuff, check out his Substack. Matthew, thank you again for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, do all the social stuff, like, share, subscribe, pass it along. We're cresting on 80,000 subscribers. So the more you can share this out, we're kind of starting a wave of guys that are interested in this work. If you're, interested in that last bit, send some incels in your life or send to some red pills in your life. We're trying to kind of counteract that message. So the more guys they could hear, real honest conversations, the better. So thank you again for tuning in. I will see you next week on another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.